But I remember one principle we wanted to sort of keep was that it could be adults would get the humor, and then children could also watch and not, you know, and not have to participate in the naughtier bits, as it were. And we always tried to, that was at least a principle that we tried to keep intact, is that kids could be sitting with their parents and the jokes would fly over their head, and, you know, so. The typical writing process was there was a long time where Frank Conniff selected the film, and it was always this moment when we'd come in for the first writing session, everybody would be there. It would be, that would be sort of the great moment, like, oh, what are we doing today? And everyone would crowd into the writing room and we'd start. And then you'd notice for this first day of writing, which went about 8 hours, you'd notice people sort of slowly creeping back out of the writing room, like Jim, who's, I have producing stuff to do, because it was so fun at first, but it took so long. But we would do this one long writing session, and then we would write the host segments on the next day, because we sometimes needed to go off of the, you know, the things from the movie itself. And then on the third day, we'd write again. And after that, it sort of went into production.
Yeah. Yep. You just need to know that we would spend all day going through one pass of this film, starting and stopping and writing comments. So you get to know these films better than the filmmakers did in some ways. And while this was happening, in the meantime, as quickly as we could after writing the host segments, we'd ship a list of props and special effects that we needed to the editor and the production people, who were always caught off guard and way behind, and we gave them way too much work to do in a very short period of time. Then after we had the scripts in, Paul and Mary Jo and Frank and other writers of ours would sit down and assign all of these jokes we had to lines of time code in the movie. And that's why it always looked like we were so good at what we did. It had to do with the fact that it was so carefully ordered. And then we would rehearse.
Which got to be longer, the rehearsal process got to be longer and longer as the show went on, because we realized if we just really keep working on this, it's so much better. Because there was a point where you just can't see Joe Don Baker's face anymore, and you just don't want to, I don't want to work on that joke because it's the one where he's this big sweaty mug, and so you kind of give up. And we finally learned if we just muscle through it and really give that a lot of time, it'll be that much better.
Then we'd have a day of rehearsal on the production, and then we'd shoot, in one day we'd shoot the Dr. Forrester Mad Scientist stuff and the Satellite of Love stuff. Then the next day we'd go in and spend the morning rehearsing, and then have a big, meaty lunch. And so we were really tired when it came to performing the movie, and we were bloated and gassy, and it was perfect.
I think you were gassy. I don't
know. I'm the only one who ordered the giant lunch, I'm sure.
No,
yeah.
No, lunch was huge. Lunch was one of the biggest events around Best Brains.
Lunch is, I attribute a lot of our success with the show to the quality of the lunches we had.
I used to sometimes think that the schedule was rigorous, and my wife, Bridget, who also worked on the show, when she was at home, she used to tease me because I'd call from the set, and it would be like 5:30, and say, well, this seems like it's going to go a long time. And then I'd show up at the door at like 6:15. You know, you are such a whiner. You work in TV, and it's like the easiest thing in the world. Yeah. So sometimes it felt rigorous, but then you realize this is like a dream job, and we always wanted to keep our lives intact outside of the show, so it was pretty easy.
It was always important for us to have a life beyond the TV show and not have to sit in a bungalow in Hollywood on a studio lot day in and day out, going from writing to producing and then back to writing and doing that cycle. We give ourselves ample vacation time. We do 6 shows or 6 weeks of work and then have a week off. It was actually
nice.
It's wonderful. And at first, of course, when we were first gearing up the show and figuring out what it was, we spent a whole lot more time doing it. And that was when we were having 12 and 14-hour days and 6-day weeks. But we got rid of that crap as quickly as we could.
We were pretty democratic in the writing room, and there were times where we would pair off. And I do know that Paul and Paul Chaplin and Mary Jo Pehl enjoyed a nice sporting, they would kid about their feuds.
Sort of a Tracy Hepburn thing.
Yes, yes. So those two would bicker in humorous ways always. But beyond that, I don't think it formed off into any armies. It was all pretty much...
The one thing that was always fun for the writers was, since Mike did most of the musical arranging, since he actually had musical talent and could play the piano.
This much talent.
But we'd all get to work with Mike on a song. Everybody everybody loved to do the songs. The songs were like the most fun you could have, was to sit down and write a song. And generally, unless it was something a cappella, it would take Mike's talents to arrange it. And even then, it would take Mike's talents to arrange it. So everybody got a chance to collaborate with Mike, I think, on a song. And it was always a treat. We didn't really have cultural quotas, and one thing we tried not to do was to be too topical, because then it would really date the show. And we wanted the humor to be more general and universal. And so we became a drift net. Say we're doing a show in 1996. We were a drift net for every bit of the culture that happened in 1996 all the way back to, I don't know, 1878. Or,
right.
We probably had references to Henri Rousseau at certain points. So, yeah, we tried not to be too topical.
But occasionally we would succumb and you'd give in because it just seemed too perfect. And then you'd see it 2 years later and you'd go, oh, I wish we hadn't done that. I wish we had had the willpower. So
yeah, our loathing for current pop stars, undeserving pop stars, would come out. So we'd make fun of Adam Duritz, or the guy who was the lead singer for the Crash Test Dummies. And so it really becomes obscure after a while, because who the hell remembers the lead singer for the Crash Test Dummies, except he had that voice.
Yes, that's fun.
Oh, fun.
I think the sketch writing, people got really excited about that. And there was this phenomenon with the movie writing, again, where it was so, the morning session would just be loaded with jokes, and then it would be 2 in the afternoon, and we'd all be slumped down in our chairs, and we'd be, logy from lunch, and there'd be like no comment anywhere, and you'd have to be rewinding a film, and it did really get to be work at that point. But the sketch writing was always a little more sprightly all the way through, I think.
Yeah, writing was always rigorous, especially the movie writing was always rigorous. And we'd also break off onto our own when we'd write the sketches, and so everybody get to sort of put their spin on something and have something to be proud of, and I think that was always reflected in the sketches. When it came to, I always made, it's like different types of fun that we were able to have. We'd have the fun of doing the movies, and that would get sort of tiring, and then we'd write the sketches, and you'd be done with that, and then we'd go and shoot the things. And then we go perform the film, in front of the blue screen, and there were like 4 different varieties of fun that we got. And of course there was always lunch.
It was a buffet of fun.
It all comes back to lunch, though.
Yes. But there was a moment where you presented your sketch to the rest of the writing room, and then all the production people would come in as well, and that was always a fun moment too. It was like a little show and tell. Here's the thing that I did, which in the normal writing process you were obviously always throwing out jokes, but this was like, this is my little secret sketch, and so that was fun too.
The movie picking process was, the way it was done changed over a while, but it generally meant a lot of pain of some person or another sitting in a room and watching a lot of rejects. It was Frank for the longest time.
Frank.
He loved it, though.
And Frank would, the process for a while with Frank was he would pick every Coleman Francis movie that was ever made. That was pretty much the process for half a year. He loved the worst movies. So whatever the most bizarre and sort of empty movies there are, that was Frank. But we all got to have a say in it. So.
Yeah, it's true. But I think when it came down to it, there were generally like 20 films looked at before a film was actually picked that would work for the show. So it was rugged. It was really tough. And when other people started taking over for Frank's work and reviewing movies, people would just come in cross-eyed and say, my God, I've just seen the black tar at the bottom of humanity's soul, and I'm sick. I'm just sick. Some of these movies were just wretched and horrible and downright made by Satan, I'd say.
Yes.
Made Roman Polanski look like a Christian movie maker,
But there was a moment where we got so good at reviewing the movies that if there'd be 5 of us in the room and you'd plug the thing in and you'd see one credit come up and you go, no, and it would just be rejected.
Yes.
There was no need to go through the whole thing. You'd see a name or something, you just go, no, off limits.
I remember now that hillbilly teenage adult, I don't want to say the name because some of you freaks out there will try to find this film, and that's just wrong. And I don't know how we got it, but we got it out of the place as quickly as possible. It was about child brides. And it was
Which
just
gives you a clue to the title of the film.
But and it was all set in Crackerville, and it's like they actually hired, people who lived there rather than actors. And I had a good cry after that one, and then
In
a
fact,
little
we should
liquor and a
probably-
shower.
We should break tape and shower right now, in fact.